Do we have any
You hear
viewers?
me?
Corey.
I think we're on
Okay.
now.
Okay, I think we're good.
Hilarious. Okay,
Hey, trying to figure this out
so
together. I love it.
here we are. This is a very historic moment in Fox Marin history, and things are coming full circle, as we'll explain in a second. But this is our absolute first roundtable YouTube, and it took us a little minute. We had some technical difficulties, but apparently we are now live. So glad to be here. My name is Ralph Fox, and I am the co-founder of Fox Marin Associates. I also am the broker of record. And today we have the lovely, fabulous Corey Marin, co-founder of Fox Marin. Also, we have the two OGs of Fox Marin, Jessica, aka the Queen of Acquisitions, Spillis, and our own resident heartthrob, Ian Busher, VP Sales at Fox Marin. So glad to have us all here convened. And maybe, Ian, you, before we went live, were talking about how this was very symbolic and actually an anniversary, a 5-year anniversary.
Absolutely. It is, what is the date today? March 12th. So we're at least in the same week as the announcement from the World Health Organization that we were officially having a pandemic. So it was right around this time 5 years ago that we were doing our real estate during COVID podcasts that were somewhat live like this. They were just on Zoom, but they were really, really well attended. And that was a really, really interesting time. And speaking of interesting times, this is a really, really interesting time. So what is it about the middle of March? Beware the Ides of March. Isn't that from Caesar? Beware the Ides of March. There's something about the middle of March that we should all be leery of because it just seems to be, I don't know, a time of year when terrible things seem to come up. But we will survive. We will come through it. And that's what we're here for, right? Is to talk about what's going on out there and answer people's questions and discuss it between ourselves.
Exactly.
Right? Corey?
Oh my God. Okay, I just need to just for 2 seconds just recalibrate because I, for some reason, am the tech support of Fox Marin.
Sure.
I don't know how this happened. I am not by any means the youngest person on the team, nor am I the most tech savvy. But even when we go back 5 years ago and rewind to those live webinars that we did on Zoom when nobody even knew how to use Zoom, I was the one that had to run those. And I literally would be like in like knots about it about 2 hours before about just the technology of it. I don't mind talking in front of people or having these conversations, or I'm super extroverted, but the technology of it, very, very nerve-wracking. And then just now trying to figure the the YouTube live. I'm literally like my whole body is vibrating right now. Like I'm like, oh my God. So just give me a second over here just to like get the temperature down. Like I'm like,
You need a moment. You need
like
a
I
moment.
need a moment. You guys
Yeah.
like talk amongst yourselves. I just need a moment just to breathe after just knowing that we're on here. And there's 7 people that have joined us, which I just find to be the most exciting thing.
That's great. Great.
Yes.
Hello,
Welcome,
7
viewers.
people.
Welcome.
Yes, we're so happy to have you here. I don't know how you found your way to this live stream. We do know what we are talking about. We are very familiar with YouTube and being on video here, but this is really, really interesting. So anyways, Jess, do you have anything you want to say before we get into it?
No, I'm just excited for us as a team. I'm excited that we figured this
Yep.
out, and I'm excited to have a live discussion and actually engage with some of our viewership.
And most of our content on YouTube, well, all of it, none of it has ever been live before. So we've always had the ability to edit.
Mhm.
So now we have to be really careful. Corey, no swearing. And I'll try and stop saying. So
Okay.
if we can achieve those two things, I'll definitely consider this to be a win. And Corey, maybe when people ask questions, there's an area where they can ask questions in the chat. Do you want to?
Yep, there's a welcome to the live chat section, which I have open over here. So I will monitor that. And if you can hear us and you just want to send me an emoji, I would really appreciate it because it'll make me know that it's working. I don't know. Send me something if you're watching this so that I know that the live chat is working. Oh, it says open panel. Join the conversation to interact with the creator. Let me figure this out as you guys get going.
Please,
And
Okay.
see if I
please
can
stand
get this
by.
back on.
Yeah, working through
Yes,
the tech
Got this,
issues.
Corey. You got it.
God,
You got
okay.
this, Corey. You got
Okay.
this. You got
All right.
this.
Thanks, guys.
So I think it's really auspicious to have this new step forward in live broadcasting. It's our 5-year anniversary, and as you were saying, Ian, the world is literally burning. So why don't we talk about that, and why don't we get into, in such an uncertain time, what is sentiment out there right now? Like, especially with buyers, like in this environment, how are buyers looking at the market and what are they thinking about given all of this uncertainty? Maybe I'll point this one to the queen of acquisitions to get the ball rolling. Jess, what are your clients saying? What type of conversations are you having? What is mood on the street? And just to give context, basically, the president of the United States has indicated that he wants to annex Canada, and there's like a million tariffs that are on and off again. And Doug Ford is the only person defending our honor or sovereign integrity at the moment. Feels like we're in some type of a weird parallel universe. And when you're looking at making $1 million or $2 million purchase or commitment, you definitely want some certainty in the market. And right now, we're just not there. So, Jess, what are you seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. So to bring everyone up to speed, we do have potential tariffs that are currently set to take place April 2nd. It seems like this entire back and forth is like a high stakes game of chicken. So what I'm seeing boots on the ground with buyers, especially right now, is there's a lot of hesitation and people are still trying to wait and see what is going to happen. But the problem is that we've been doing this for the last several months and the football just keeps getting passed down the field. So we're at an intersection where we're trying to evaluate, does it make sense to just continue to move forward full steam ahead? Also keeping in mind the fundamentals of the market that we do still have a supply problem, especially in certain asset classes. And then on the flip side with sellers, it really just depends on their individual circumstances. Are they under financial duress? Can they afford to ride out the waves? The rhetoric that I'm continuing to hammer home with all of our clients is that real estate is always going to be a long-term game. Unlike the stock market, it's not going to react immediately. And so usually you'll see a very slow progression. And so I think that regardless of what happens in the world and in the economy, there's going to be equal amount of risk with opportunity. And I think a very savvy individual, whether you are a buyer or a seller, will be able to see those opportunities open up regardless of what's happening. So I'm right now working with individuals to mine those opportunities and be that voice of reason to help them peel back the noise, not get caught up in the emotionality of things, and just reminding people not to panic. So that's basically where I'm at. There's still a lot of hesitation out there, but I think that there's still very much a path to forge ahead.
Now, I remember in the very early days of the pandemic, March, April 2020, when the world had shut down, and yet somehow we were deemed essential workers. And I mean, when we would go shopping, we were literally Windexing all of our containers or whatever we were putting on them just to keep them trying to keep them clean. It was just a terrifying time. And Jessica on our team, the queen of acquisitions, was the first one out there, literally in a hazmat suit,
Yeah.
showing properties and acquiring properties. Just unbelievable that you were out there at that point in time. And some of our clients just got these incredible wins because they were bold enough to move forward when other people were fearful.
And just see the opportunity. And I mean, we reference this quote all the time, the Warren Buffett quote, where he says, be fearful when people are greedy and greedy when people are fearful. And I think right now that is as powerful of a statement as it gets. And then also just keeping in mind that real estate is there for the long term. People will always need somewhere to live. And fundamentally, we do still very much have a supply problem in Toronto, especially if you're in the freehold asset class.
Ian, what are you seeing in terms of sentiment right now? I want to drill down more on buyers at the moment.
Sure.
What
Yeah.
are you seeing?
I think, I mean, a lot of what Jess said, I'd completely agree with. I think, in our weekly meetings as a team and in our individual calls with each other, there's just a lot of talk about people being stuck. Um, And just this past week, talking about, we keep going back to this COVID situation from 5 years ago, um, that when there's any kind of uncertainty, people just tend to put the brakes on and take the benches, right? And call the game off. And that's really, I think, what a lot of buyers are doing is they're not seeing the opportunity. What they're doing instead is saying, I'm just gonna wait. I want to do what everybody else is doing, and I want to do it when there's certainty. And to a certain degree, I don't blame them. There is a lot of uncertainty out there. We don't know where we're going, but and I think Jess kind of hinted at this. If you're looking to make money long term, this would be a great time to be a buyer. It's trickier if you're a buyer and a seller, but the sentiment out there is um, buyers are nervous, and rightfully so. And I think that's part of our job is to kind of give them all of the information we possibly can, positive and negative, and just let them make their own decisions. That's really what it comes down to. But if you're looking for the mood on the street, the mood on the street is I don't know where this is going, and as such, I'm gonna sit on my money and I'm gonna sit on my hands and wait until I've been given some kind of an indication that things are gonna be okay.
Cora, is there anything you want to add to that?
Well, I really focus more on the selling side of the team and don't work with a lot of personal buyers. I can say that it feels like 50% of people are just like walking around like this is no big deal. It's really interesting to me, like how many people don't feel affected, aren't paying attention, are not really politically inclined, are not really moved emotionally by what's happening at all, have really no idea what's happening with the Liberal leadership race or Mark Carney kind of being coronated as the new prime minister, that there may be an election soon. Like there are people that are actually paying zero attention to what's going on. And then the people that are paying attention to it, I think are really effing stressed out. And so I think you're seeing a very volatile presence out there, and a lot of people have very opposing positions as to what's going on. And of course, that is going to give people hesitancy to move forward because we have so many known unknowns, and it doesn't really feel right now that there's like a key date where we're like, you know what, this is all going to wrap up by the end of April. Like we don't really have that. I think once an election is called, I think it'll be really helpful. I think once we know who actually is running the country will be really helpful for people. And once we can just negotiate through this tariff war, if you want to call it a war, I think people will come back off the sidelines a lot faster, and it's going to be like overnight, much like we've seen in other stressful periods in the market where people are really responsive very quickly. And we can see a flip flop of sentiment, over a 7-day period. And we're like, the market's dead. And the next week, there'll be multiple offers on all different price points in different neighborhoods and asset classes. So it's just a very reactive, weird time. And I feel really bad. Like, I think people are really, really stressed. And I want people to feel when we do these roundtable discussions live on Thursdays at 6, that you can dump your questions or ask anything and use us as a resource. Because we've been doing a lot of real estate therapy calls lately, a lot of them, and we have for the last year and a half, and we're happy to be that lifeline for people.
I think what's really interesting coming from our side, the real estate agent, realtor perspective, is the last 2 years might have been the 2 worst years in Toronto real estate. Maybe not necessarily directly in terms of pricing, but certainly in terms of low transactions and a lot of changing headwinds, making it very difficult to advise anybody, and having us to be put in a position where we're having to have a lot of hard conversations all the time. And so when we started this year at the beginning of 2025, it seemed like our beloved prime minister, who is actually not that beloved, had resigned. It seemed like there was a clear path for a transition. And it also seemed like interest rates were going to trend down. The economy seemed to be stabilizing, and there was this momentum and good vibes feeling about what was going to happen in 2025. And finally, after the last 2 years, we were all going to get a collective break and a collective sigh and a little more stability so that people could go forward and make the best interest in decisions for themselves, and we can help facilitate in that. And boy, did that change. And it's really interesting because I read the Bank of Canada's statement or the report that they put out with their rate decision earlier this week. And they alluded to that themselves about how the bank was looking at 2025 and what their expectations were, both from an economic and political standpoint. And so it seemed like there were a lot of people who were kind of starting the year off thinking, okay, we're on the other side of all this instability and all this uncertainty. Better days are ahead. And then all of a sudden it was like we all ran into a brick wall. And so it's really interesting to see that transition. And now everyone is trying to sort of rebalance. And what we did see on Wednesday was not necessarily a surprise. We did talk about it on our podcast, but we talked about the Bank of Canada coming out with a interest rate reduction, which the expectations were about 90% that it was going to happen. So the consensus was definitely expecting it, but it was very nice to see. And so rates are coming down. They're going to continue to come down. I still think we could see close to 2% overnight lending rate by the summer, with and or without tariffs. And so if we can end up with lower interest rates in a month or two and some type of a resolution to this political instability, both in Canada and with the US, the market could be in a position to turn really quickly. And so that's another interesting aspect to all of this uncertainty is it could change really quickly once we have a new government in place, once we have some type of relationship with the US and in a much lower interest rate environment than when we started out the year. How are you guys seeing interest rates play out in specifically in buyers' decisions? Is because it's always been, and this is also something that's so interesting, is interest rates have always been the topic of conversation for the last 2 years in terms of anyone making a decision about anything real estate related. And now it seems like it might be taking a little bit of a back seat given all the drama. What are you guys seeing? Ian, I'll start with you.
I was just going to add to what you were saying. I think what's really interesting, as you laid it all out, I sort of came up with this was that the interest rate reduction was largely predicted, right? That was page 10 news. Didn't surprise anybody. It didn't need to be at the forefront of the headlines. But I don't think Trudeau's resignation came as any kind of surprise. I don't think Rob Ford getting reelected came as any kind of surprise. So basically, this year, with the exception of the tariffs, has been largely anticipated, right? We sort of knew that we were in for a federal election at some point this year. Trudeau dropping the news that he was leaving finally just kind of sped that up. So we have this spring of a bunch of things in Canada. What we don't know is who will be our prime minister next. That's kind of one thing that's maybe a little bit on the fence right now. But other than that, everything else has gone sort of the way that we expected it to. And
Except
Corey,
for
I
the
see your
fact that
hand.
except for the fact that Parliament was prorogued. We could never have expected that. We literally had no government running the country for like a
Yeah,
major period of time. Like, hello, who
We
is
still don't.
we still don't. We still don't. So that
right.
is like also a major twist as well, which I think is
Yep.
actually insane and is not a way that the Canadian population has been well represented. I don't know how people are not protesting on the streets about it. Like, I literally am like, where is everyone? We should be in an uproar over this. We have zero people representing our interests. I just find it on a
Canadians
national
don't have
level.
time to protest. They got to go to work so they can pay their super high taxes. But I was just going to say, American wise, I think when that news calms down, that could be the first step.
Yeah.
That really is the thing that is making people feel stuck and undecided about moving forward with anything. So I think that and Parliament coming back and us getting some political stability. But really, right now, I think we'd be on much calmer waters without the American upheaval of everything else. The rest of it was largely predicted, I feel.
But
Yes.
it's interesting because I think that all of this uproar with the US is now causing Canada to put a mirror onto itself and relook at a lot of things like what is our energy policy or what is our taxation? Are we competitive? Why can't we trade between provinces? What is going on with Quebec? Like it's put this big mirror up on ourselves, forcing us to reflect on the decisions we've made over the last decade and really where we want to go in the future. And something like that really doesn't happen very often. And so I think it's a really big effect that's coming down as a result of all of this bluster out of the US. So again, just super interesting times. I really, you know what I want to do? I would like to make a commitment that in 6 months from now, let's have a podcast. We'll do it live. And the topic will be how bored we are and how unstressed we are and how easy everything is, because we certainly haven't been in that environment for a long time. Jess, what are your thoughts?
Well, back to your question earlier about how the declining of interest rates has affected the marketplace. Truth be told, I actually have not seen any palpable changes in the marketplace based on the interest rate cuts.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure if it's a product of it being expected, but my sense is that things are still really expensive for people. And the rates are still very high to make sense of, especially on a monthly basis. It's not just about the down payment, it's the carrying costs that are still very difficult for people to make sense of right now. And so even though it's a step in the right direction, I don't think fundamentally it is going to change a purchaser's mindset right now, their sense of urgency, or their level of aggression. Buyers still very much have their backs up against the wall. They are still very entitled in terms of what they want, not even just what they want to pay for a property, but all of the other terms and conditions that go into that purchase. And so it just feels like there's a lot of tension right now with buyers and sellers. And I have not yet seen rates change that in any capacity, which is very interesting.
It is interesting. And I think going back to what Ian was saying about this consensus at the beginning of the year, that rates are going to keep coming down, and that's what's happening. It's almost like it's kind of priced into the market right now, that the expectations are that it's coming down and people are purchasing or not based on that type of assumption. But it still is pretty significant when the prime, fix was like 7.5% a year and a half ago. And now we're at like four and change. I mean, that's a pretty significant drop. So, I think we have seen impact on the market with rates, but I don't think we've seen it this year. I think last year in the fall and in going into the end of year, we were seeing it much more top of conversation. But yeah, I agree. I don't think it's factoring in right now.
I think there will be a tipping point.
Yeah.
And like I said, this is all a step in the right direction, but it's kind of like when you're trying to melt an ice cube, you think that the ice cube isn't melting even though the temperatures are dropping. And then once it hits a certain temperature, it starts to dissolve. And that's what we're looking at with interest rates right now.
Cora, I think you had something on your mind.
Yes, I just wanted to mention that Amit Bandari from Condo just jumped into the conversation, and he said economic uncertainty, political uncertainty, and the high cost of living are all influencing buyer activity for sure. So he agrees 100% with Jess on this. So do I. I don't really feel like interest rates are moving the needle right now. And I think people have other things on their mind. Like when you think about what it costs to go buy your groceries, which is insane still, like it's just absolutely asinine how much money Ralph and I spend on food just for the two of us. I'm like, what do we eat?
Yeah, imagine having two or three kids.
Two or three kids and like,
Teenagers,
yeah,
right?
and having to send your kids to like skating camp and like hockey camp. And then you've got the overhead of all those extracurricular activities or whatever else, whatever you're doing in your life. I just don't think the interest rates now can move the needle enough for somebody to be like, you know what?
Yep.
It's time for me to buy a $2 million
Gas, the rise in property taxes.
all of it, the carbon tax,
Right,
this
all of it.
tax. Like it's just getting
Yep.
kind of
Yep.
absolutely disgusting. So I feel like the interest rate thing, like it used to affect things so much that we'd be like, oh, the interest rate announcement, the next week you would see movement, the needle would move and you could really see a pattern. And now I'm like, I didn't feel it at all this week. And if anything, it was like, no, I don't mean to use this word because I know it's an ugly word for people, but like the tariff situation trumped the interest rates. And it just became like a no-brainer big deal. And people have just moved on and are just as distracted as they were before.
Okay, so I'm going to switch gears or lanes here a bit, and let's talk about selling. Corey, what are you seeing as selling right now in the market, and what is struggling?
Well, I think if you had asked me this question 4 weeks ago, I would have had a very different answer than I do today. I think that there are still very active buyers in the low rise category, especially the entry level low rise category that are looking for something with upside potential in good neighborhoods. In the price point in there would be like your 1.1 to your 1.6 semi-detached house in, let's say, South Riverdale or Leslieville or Ronsonsville as an example. I still think that's a very hot commodity, and I expect that that will continue throughout 2025. However, right now, I think there's a little bit of a freeze across the board, in all categories, because I think there's just a little bit of a retraction, obviously, from buyers. But like, why would a seller necessarily run out and put their home on the market today? Like, is this really good timing for you to get the best and highest price for your property? Maybe there's a strategic advantage in doing that, depending on where you're selling, what the value of your home is, where you're located, how much other inventory you might be competing against. But I don't really see this as being like prime time to list. So I think there are certain condos that are attractive to certain buyers, not your cookie cutter condo, nothing like your typical box in the sky that you would see in central downtown Toronto, but some of your more interesting, unique, end user driven product, like a hard loft conversion, a condo townhouse, perhaps with like a beautiful terrace, something that has a unique offering. I still think there's buyers out there for that because they are a few and far between. And I think anything over the $2 million mark is going to struggle right now. I just, maybe it's me. I don't have data to support this. I just don't see people running and being like, this is a great time for me to buy, or somebody going, this is a great time to sell. So I think we're going to see a holding pattern for, I'd say, the next 4 to 8 weeks.
Okay. I think
The other thing that drives the encouragement of listing your property for sale is seeing whether or not there's a place that you can actually move up or move into. And if we're also not seeing the inventory come online, it's very cyclical and then directly impacts somebody's ability to put their home on the market.
I think a date to watch, and we're talking about this with several of our clients, is this April 2nd, because April 1st was April Fool's Day. So that's why they decided to go with April 2nd for reciprocal tariffs for the entire world. So we'll see how that plays out. But I think it doesn't make sense, if you have flexibility with going to market, to be rushing to market in this moment. Because we have seen situations, especially the four of us, some of the junior agents on our team have no idea about what I'm talking about because they haven't seen or experienced it. But we have seen moments over the last 5 years where the market literally has turned off like a tap. Nothing to do with the fundamentals of the market, but to do with exterior pressures on the market, like the one we're seeing right now coming out of the US. And so it's a very interesting time to see what's going to happen. And we talked about this in our meeting and alluded to this earlier in our conversation where, when people are faced with adversarial situations, either they fight, either they run, or they freeze. And there's a high probability that the low-rise market might go into a bit of a freeze depending upon how things play out over the next few weeks. And I do think that this will pass. And I do think this is going to pass, and it's going to meet lower interest rates at some point in time. And it will definitely reignite things. When? I have no idea. Corey?
I just wanted to mention that we have another question from the chat. And
Oh,
since
good.
I'm the chat
So
moderator,
fun.
I know.
Love it.
I'm still
Who's the
like
question from?
Amit, our biggest fan, and I'm
Oh,
still
okay.
so hot from like figuring out how to go live. Like I still cannot bring the temperature down. Like I'm still recovering from the trauma of trying to figure that out. Okay. So Amit asks, I'm curious if the more rare or harder to reproduce condos are seeing activity, such as something directly connected to a subway stop. Are you guys seeing anything interesting in that category? Jess, Ian, Ralph? I'm gonna say not really.
No.
I don't have a ton of condo buyers right now. So that's
Yeah,
really
I
a
just don't have
difficult
the data
question for me to
to answer
answer.
it correctly, but
And I think that's what it is right now, is it's not necessarily about, especially if you're in the one bedroom category, it's not necessarily about how rare or gorgeous is your condo. It's just there's no buyers out there. And I think once they do start to go to market, those will be the first ones that they are in pursuit of naturally. And they'll always be the last to adjust and the first to recover. But right now, it just seems like condo buyers are very few and far in between. And that's why we're seeing those listings stack up and those months of inventory continue to climb with each passing day.
Although we have had success with some of the ultra larger condo units in some of the more hard loft buildings, those seem to be the larger units seem to be holding the most value. And it's something that we've talked about on this channel before, but our expectation is once we see low rise in that first time buyer price point start to really take off, that is the first category in the condo market that we expect to react just due to affordability. So we have had some luck and seen some pretty strong results with some of these larger hard lofts, more rare type properties on Sumac or 68 Broadview, for example. We have an interesting one coming to market theoretically in the next couple of weeks on Pape. So it'll be really interesting to see how that one does in this environment. Because I do think for these unique properties, there are buyers out there. And one of the things that I have learned is never underestimate the amount of money in Toronto. And so for the right properties, buyers are still out there.
For
I was
sure.
going
I
to say
think
too,
go ahead.
everybody.
Go
Ian?
ahead.
I was just going to say, Ralph, I think that's because that's a bit of a different demographic, right? We've got
Mhm.
probably an older buyer, maybe downsizing, maybe giving the house to the kids, whatever it happens to be, or moving to town and looking for something else. It's not an investor and it's not a first-time buyer when we get up to those 2 and 3 bedroom units or a hard loft conversion that's a little older, bigger square footage, nice terrace, et cetera, et cetera. You're getting into now an alternative to kind of a freehold in that million to 1.5 range. And so that's why I think I was going to add too, I mean, investors are kind of just sitting on the sidelines, but a first time buyer right now, even if you could pick up a one bedroom for 500,000, I think I'm trying to put myself in the mindset of somebody between 26 and 30 with they're in their first or second professional position. If they're worried about money, if they're worried about job security, might be thinking, I'm going to sit with my cash because of the fact that if all of a sudden things turn around, I would have to sell this condo again in this market. So I might be able to pick one up. But if I need the cash back out of this, I don't want to have to turn around in 6 to 8 months and dump this thing because of job loss. That might be something that first time buyers are thinking.
I also think it's a matter of experience in the market too, right? Like a first time home buyer is not going to be as savvy and understand the nuances that go into the power of leverage. And so they're going to be far more afraid to make that first move because they don't understand long term how that property can benefit them and all of the ways that they can leverage that asset. Whereas somebody that has done this several times before in a higher economic class, usually the ones that are going for those larger units that you were talking about, Ralph, those are people that very likely have the ability to see the long-term potential and projection of the city, and they are trying to capitalize on those opportunities right now. And it's part of the reason why wealthy people love recessions, is just so that they can go in and buy up as much as they can at the lowest possible price point. And I think we're starting to see that right now with that category.
And the other part is that a lot of people, when they make real estate decisions, they're not necessarily always based or driven by finances. A lot of times their lifestyle or changes in lifestyle. And that is why even during the toughest of times in the market, we were still out there transacting because there are people out there dying, there are people out there divorcing, there are people out there litigating, keeping lawyers busy. And so there's always going to be life changes in residential real estate that are forcing transactions to happen based on reasons other than being primarily driven by finances. And the other thing that just caught my attention in was when you were talking about a first-time buyer looking at a condo for 500,000. And I've been doing this long enough that I remember a time when we had a buyer client saying they wanted to buy a condo for 500,000 and searching the entire GTA and finding 3 condos
Hmm.
on the market. And they
Yeah.
probably
Or
really,
co-op.
At the
yeah, and they
edges
weren't
of the
even,
GTA. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so again, if you're able to think long term and you just look at the supply coming online of condos in a few years' time, there will be nothing. And the cost to replace your condo in the future will cost $1,700 a square foot. So
Hmm.
a day of reckoning, if you can buy it $1,000 a square foot and comfortably hold on to it, or more importantly, live in it, you will set yourself up for success long term without a doubt. It's just real estate is not a get rich quick scheme. And if you're buying something thinking you might need to sell it in 6 months, it's probably not the right situation for you to be looking at buying.
Also, going back to the personality types that Corey was talking about earlier, where you've got 50% of the population that's uptight about this and watching the headlines every 10 minutes and trying to navigate it, and the other 50% that have no idea what's going on and don't care and just go about their day-to-day business. I find some of the people that are calling us to say they'd like to buy are, like Jessica was saying, an older demographic, more market experience. They might be in their 60s
More
or
liquid.
70s and saying, hey, you know what? I actually want a great big, sexy real loft conversion in Toronto. And when they call and we say, well, the interest rates just came down. Oh, I had no idea. And well, we have this problem. Oh, I had no idea. They're just making a move for themselves. It
Mhm.
has nothing to do with investment. It has nothing to do with taking advantage. It's just that they woke up today and they said, you know what? I'd like to move. I'd like to do this. Give me some guidance on it. So that's some of the buyers too, I think, are people who just want to move when they want to move and kind of like shopping, do it on a bit of a whim.
Yep.
So that's where we kind of need to be advisors, but also be there for those people who have that kind of money and are ready to make that kind of move.
Yep.
Core, anything you want to add or any other questions in our chat?
No other questions in the chat right now. I just wanted to say that if I was a first-time home buyer, I would be really freaking scared. I remember the first time I bought a condo, I literally was terrified, 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 terrified. I think I shook in my bed for like a month after I bought it, thinking, oh my God, the market's going to crash. Why did I buy this condo? I bought it at the worst time, which is actually hilarious in retrospect, obviously. Um, and so if I was a first-time home buyer, and I could maybe buy a condo, but then I go on to every headline or my news feed or into YouTube, like everything is doom and gloom. There's so many scary headlines in terms of the real estate market,
Mm-hmm.
particularly condos right now. I could see myself being very, very sucked into that. And then also the feeling of not a lot of your friends would be buying. So then you would feel very alone in the idea of being like, is this a mistake? Because you're looking around and your colleagues aren't buying and your parents are telling you not to buy and your aunt's telling you not to. And
Telling you not
you
to
did
buy.
do some, sorry? Sorry,
And the
Jess?
media is telling you not to buy.
Not to, I think it'd be really scary. And so I think it would be obviously an amazing time to like scoop something up.
Yeah.
It would be incredible. But I
Yeah.
could
If you can
also
do it.
really, really understand why that would be a very terrifying thing to do right now. And so I'm completely on side with the newbie on this one. And I completely appreciate why sitting on the sidelines feels like the right thing to do. Because I think if I were to go back to my 25-year-old self, I would be doing the same.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you
It
just
would
think
really
back,
be
if you
going
just think
against the
back
grain.
to last year, Corey, then that would put you in that
Oh,
spot.
yes, just last year.
But I do think like one thing that is interesting as well is if you're a first time buyer, atypical to almost any time in the Toronto real estate condo market, um, you'd have so much choice. So there's nothing compelling you. It's like, oh,
Okay.
I really like this condo. Oh, I really like this building. Oh, I really like this floor plan. Oh, there's 4 of them just sitting on the market. Maybe I'll just wait or see if there's something else.
Mm-hmm.
Versus other times
Let's see
where,
what happens next week and the
yeah,
week after that and the week after
exactly.
that. Yeah. Yeah. There's no urgency to it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was going to say too, we talked about buyers moving up to a different class of buyer and seller. that people buying in the twos right now tend to be, at least in my experience, people who have something that would be entry level to sell. So talking about how 1.2 to 1.5 semi-detached 3-bedroom is an easy sale, that somebody who's sitting on one of those who actually has the confidence to say, I can pick up a $2.5 million home for 2.12223 and then know that I can confidently sell. Those are the people I'm finding making moves in that on that
Yes.
side of things, because of the
That's a
fact
really
they
good
know they've
point.
got a product. If they've taken good care of it or renovated it, they know that it's not going to be hard to sell their starter home.
We have
I
a
think-
stunning $3.5 million penthouse on the market right now, and it should have sold in any other condition or time period, and it will sell because it's really a one of a kind. But just watching how long it's being drawn out for something that's an exceptional property is definitely indicative of what we're seeing right now.
Mm-hmm.
Though I do feel with that particular property, Ralph, is that it has a lot more momentum than I anticipated due to the circumstances around the condo market. Like it's
Correct.
had a lot more interest in people through it and questions and tours and repeat showings more than I would have expected for the price point in the location, with the condo sector being so oversaturated. So it goes to show what a standout property it really is. And as you said earlier, there are people with money in Toronto that are willing to make moves right now.
Yep.
So my
Mm-hmm.
feeling is that we're going to manifest that sale in the next 7 days. Next time we live chat, make sure you check with me in the chat, and I'll let you know if it's sold. Next week at this time. Firm, done.
Awesome. Well, do you guys have anything to add? I think that's a great way to end this conversation on a high note. Our first initial live Fox Marin YouTube. Anyone want to add anything?
Corey, do we have any lingering questions?
No lingering questions, but I
Okay,
would
excellent.
say that
Excellent.
for our first YouTube live, we had 16 people watching, which honestly, I know that does not sound crazy, but it's more than I expected. I was like, no one's going to come, guys. Let's just practice. And there's people here.
And for all 16 of you watching this at home, I love each and every one of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Viewers.
Thank
Yes,
you for
thank you.
coming. And we'll be more organized on the next one, but at least when we become famous for doing these live podcasts, you could say you were at the initial Fox Marin podcast. So thank you guys
I was
so much
there.
for joining. On behalf of myself, Ralph Fox, Corey, Jessica, and Ian, we love you, and we hope to see you next week.
Every
Mhm.
week.
Any
6 o'clock
questions? Call us
Thursdays.
anytime.
Bye, guys.
Guys,
Bye.
bye.